That year I lived in the dying village of Pavlovka. Somewhere nearby some minerals had been discovered. I won't say which ones, I'm afraid of breaking the secrecy. And it's not important at all for the reader. They threw us, a whole party of geologists and helpers, into a clear field, told us to set up tents, brought up a Ural with equipment, a mobile laboratory, a container with food and all sorts of household tricks, coal briquettes for the cooker, paraffin, a small field kitchen. Sometime later, after we had done the necessary research, the bulk of the workers were called back, the camp was shut down, and I was left to wait for the resumption of work. They coordinated something there, waited for funding, solved some long bureaucratic issues. I didn't mind much. My salary came to my card, plus all sorts of field seasonal traveling allowances. I had an old but quite strong UAZ, which was put at my disposal, and a serious stock of food. Flour, cereals, sugar, stew, condensed milk. I did not set up a new camp in the place of the abandoned camp, but asked to stay with all my belongings with grandmother Lizaveta, a tall, thin old woman, bony, ungraceful, not unkind. Her neighbor, friend and eternal opponent in disputes, Baba Luda, was fat, stunted, but her character was grouchy, quarrelsome, grumpy. I prudently moved in with Grandma Lisa, but I also shared my supplies with Luda, which earned her respect. The thing is that I had such important things as salt, matches, candles, soap, paraffin, as well as tinned food, stew, and condensed milk. In return, I received a small hut with a soft bed, dried mushrooms and berries, forest honey and other pickles and brews, which could not be found in the city. Besides, he helped old women with chopping wood and other men's housework. He liked to sit in the courtyard in the evenings drinking tea made of various herbs, listening to the unkind bickering of the old women, sometimes joining the conversation as an arbiter, or just as a fresh listener. So I tell you that Mashka is our blessed, happy woman. Oh, Liska, what are you talking about, you fool? She's a happy woman, we can't compare to her. Her house is like a railway station shanty. They're always leaving and coming, always someone living there, sleeping, eating and pigging out. Not only she had 3 children of her own, but she brought as many of them and started to lick them, just like her brothers-in-law. They boil some cereal, throw in some old lard, and it's a festive dinner. They walk around in their rags, as if they were poor, and yet they're happy. She licks them, kisses them in every place. My babies, she says, and the children grow up, give birth to their own suras, and come back to her again. She doesn't want to have a rest in her old age, but she can't get enough. She hasn't had enough of her children. Suras? I've read something like that. I think Shukshin has a story like that. It seems to be an illegitimate child. We call them bystruks. Oh, you're a wicked woman, Lyudka, sighs Grandma Lisa. It's you, as they say nowadays, who is strangled by a toad. Do you see your grandchildren often? They come twice a year on special occasions, and before they arrive, they are already rushing back. And Mashkins live for months. They help around the house. And you're lying about their poverty. They were poor when our collective farm collapsed. But when Semyon got back on his feet, they haven't been poor for a long time. Don't lie. Of course they do, Granny Luda retorted uncompromisingly. They're traveling to drop off their suras to babysit their grandmother. And they're back in town, in their offices and clubs. They have nowhere to put their children. They can't take them with them, and they can't leave them alone. And Mashka is blessed. She's happy and joyful. She'll feed and water them, and she'll fill their bags with all sorts of supplies, vegetables and pickles. Why should she not stuff it? Wondered Lizaveta. Her own children are not strangers. She pretended to be a fool, for they are finishing the last piece of lard, as you say. That's what I'm saying, their own. Baba Luda was unknowingly happy, completely ignoring the question about the last piece of lard. I keep my own. I keep them in line. When they were young, they pulled all the fat out of me. Dress, shoe, feed, buy a sled, buy a doll too. And when they grew up, then Mum got married, Mum gave me away, arranged the wedding, gave me a dowry. No, that won't work with me. I've raised you, fed you, put you on your feet. Now you'll have to make your own way. You've got a lot of brains and strength. Make your own life, but don't touch me. I live on my own. I don't have to worry about anyone else, and I don't need your worries. I've got enough of my own. Oh, Liutka, Liutka, you're lying like a dog in the street, you're lying. I don't believe you and no one will believe you, you're their mother. You bore them, fed them. They're your little blood. What are you, a wolf to throw them away? No. Why am I putting a burden on an animal for nothing? A she-wolf will protect her children to the death, not to give them any offense. And you... Lizaveta waved her hand sorrowfully. If you had raised your children, you could have taken care of your granddaughters in your old age, coddled them, babysat them. No, that's enough. I've had enough of it in my youth. Now I want to rest. Let them do as they can and as they want. I'm not their orders, and they're not my orders. I live here as I want, and I'm not going to any city. They're calling you to town too much, Ludka. Masha, if she wants to go to town, she'll be welcomed, fed and put to bed, while you'll have to live out your life here, you wretch. Shouldn't you? Granny Luda jumped up. They're waiting for you in your town, looking out of their windows. They've prepared a carpet and royal houses. Oh, you are a fool. A fool, said Grandmother Liza, without anger, and even with some pity. I won't live in the town for a month. I'll run away, or they'll put me in a coffin. They have no royal choruses there, only cages, and what can I do without a vegetable garden, without a forest and a lake? What will I do there in this cage? So I sit here, but my fathers come to me all the time, bringing their in-laws for holidays, and you are sitting alone, cuckooing, nursing your anger instead of them. You old fool! Grandma Luda couldn't stand it any longer, got up from the stoop, spat angrily and strode away from the yard. Wait, where are you going? Are you offended? Don't be sarcastic, sit down. Let's have a cup of tea together with Mishanya, eh? Why are we fighting? Choke on your tea, muttered the implacable old woman under her breath, and went away. Lizaveta did not hear the last words, or heard them, but pretended that they were not there. The words of these offensive... As was to be expected, the next day Grandma Luda, as if nothing had happened, came to her friend's house, and they sat down to drink the very tea which one of them had so resolutely refused to drink yesterday. This time the conversation was peaceful, without scolding or quarrels. They recalled the past of their Pavlovka, its history. Among other things, that day I learnt in more detail about the life of the very blessed Masha, about whom they had spoken yesterday. The dying village of Pavlovka used to be quite prosperous, though small in size. 3 or 4 streets, the main one, of course, was named after Lenin. Lenin. Asphalted, though pitted. On it all almost local civilization. Village council, club, post office, tea house, shops, food and household goods. The village council is also the board of the collective farm Zaveti Ilyicha. The collective farm is small but strong, a cowshed, a pigsty, a repair shop for tractors and other seeders and combines. In the board of directors there is always noise and bustle. The collective farm chairman Ivan Matveyevich is the local czar and god. He likes to shout, both for the cause and for prevention. On the contrary, Partorg Semenenko does not raise his voice. He has his own method. He would call the offender to his office and talk for a long time without tiring, and this usually had a stronger effect on the guilty than the loud shouts of the chairman. There was also Karl Marx Street, also a kind of central street, where the school stood. On the 1st of September, it used to be crowded with boys and girls, all with flowers, bows, ties, all dressed up, ironed, combed. It was a sight to behold. They're walking, saying their own things, jostling, laughing. And then 2 more streets, Ozernaya and Lesnaya. These were simpler, dust and dirt, worse houses and narrower paths. They weren't even streets, they were alleys. Now they're overgrown with grass and weeds, not a single house left. And then it went to ruin. The old chairman was gone. He retired and left for his children. The old party leader died, and the new one was not sent. The leading role of the party was over. The new chairman solved everything quickly and cleverly. He sold off the good machinery, and gave away the worst to the former collective farmers as shares. He plundered everything, sold it all, and ran away with his family. The club was closed down. No more money was given for its maintenance, and who needs it at their own expense? The young people started to flee to the city. But what did the old people need the club for? the men who stayed at home to cultivate the land. In their rare free time they preferred to look in the former tea house. Now it's just a regular tavern. And the post office was removed. And from 2 shops only a shop remained, and that one opens twice a week. Pavlovka began to die. Now there are about 24 old people living there. There is still electricity. But when it goes out, then Pavlovka will be finished. But before, on holidays, our Pavlovka used to hum like a beehive. The party committee would meet in the board, then a rally on the square in front of the club, and a solemn meeting with a report. There would be a concert in the club. Children would put on a play, sing songs and recite poems. We had a folk choir, so they would sing long songs to the accordion, and tears would come to my eyes. And afterwards they would organize a banquet in the canteen, all kinds of vegetables, their own wine, homemade roast with meat, a whole cauldron. And there is dancing, disco, as they say nowadays, for young people to have fun. Weddings were celebrated together, tables in several courtyards, music was blaring, the whole village was dancing, and if someone died the whole village would bury him and weep together. I listened to these stories with sympathy, but with half an ear. I had seen and heard such stories enough, though sadly, but unfortunately, habitually. I was much more interested in the story of the blessed Masha, about whose happiness or unhappiness the old women argued so fiercely. In order not to provoke any more disputes between them, I waited until Grandma Luda had not come to spend time with her neighbor, and asked Grandma Liza to tell me more about Maria. At first she waved me off. What is there to tell? There's nothing to discuss, it's just an ordinary thing. But nevertheless talked, though in her own way, with all sorts of reasoning and digressions. Now we have capitalism. Money has overshadowed everything. People have no other interest. And if we're being nice, what does a man need? Well, a piece of bread, porridge and soup, good clothes, a strong house. Health, you can't go without it. And the main thing is to have relatives and friends around you, to love each other, to help and support. And our Mashka had everything wrong from childhood. At first everything seemed to be like people, father, mother, grandparents. But my mother was in poor health. She couldn't give birth to anyone else, and soon died herself. Some disease devoured her. Nothing the doctors could do. So her father, Pashka the tractor driver, was left alone with his daughter. You know, a lonely woman can endure everything, survive on her own, and raise her children from her last strength. And a man without a woman is only good at work, but he is of little use in the house, and even with a child. So he soon brought a new wife for himself, Lyubka, a young woman with an extra girl, who also had a girl, Tanka. Well, everything is like in fairy tales. The stepmother gives her daughter gingerbread and cakes, and her stepdaughter bruises and bumps. She walks wrongly round the hut, eats a lot, lazy and stupid, and her daughter is a clear light, a sunshine in the window. And they weren't even girls yet. They were snotty little girls. What kind of workers they were. Although, if you look from the outside, Mashka was ahead of Tanya in everything, and smiling, and kind, and at home herself to help in a hurry, and in school with only A's. But Lyubka became a sotanet, hated her stepdaughter. And to say that Mashka's face was prettier, and her character softer, and her mind richer. And the neighbors admire her, and the boys begin to look at her, and the teacher can't get enough of her. But Lyubka not only poisons the girl herself, but also teaches her half-sister to do it, so that she too, therefore, was taught. At first the papa tried to protect his daughter, but he couldn't fight against a woman. He just waved her away and snapped at her, but each time more and more quietly. Then he began to drink slowly, not raging, not fighting, but sitting in a corner, shaking his head, and sometimes singing wistful songs. So Lyubka began to drink with him slowly, but she became even angrier when she was drunk, so even her own daughter got some from her under a hot hand. Mashka always wanted to study, to go to the city, to enter the institute. She found it easy to study. But there was no institute. Her father and stepmother wouldn't let her go. The collective farm was strong then. She went to work as a poultry farmer after school, and there she met her destiny. God rewarded her for all her hardships. Semyon the mechanizer noticed her and fell in love with her and immediately asked her to marry him. And she had a dear soul, not only to escape from the hated house, but also to love Senya herself. Mashkin's parents, together with matchmakers, organized a joyful and noisy wedding, even though she was not a favorite daughter, but it would be a shame in front of people if the wedding was not celebrated. Senin's parents organized a house, and the young people lived happily ever after. Lubka, looking at them, envied them, and tried to destroy their family. She came to the house and tried to shake her rights, pointing and commanding. But it didn't happen. Semyon, though not a mean man, but he said it once, and kicked her out. She tried to spread rumors that Mashka was walking away from her husband while he was in the field, but then her sister-in-law intervened and dragged her by the braids in front of all the people. Lyubka tried to protest, but all the neighbors stood up for the young people. They saw everything. They knew that the woman was lying. And soon Lyubka had no time for that. Her beloved Tanya suddenly found herself pregnant by who knows who. She kept silent, like a partisan at an interrogation, not giving away her darling. As one woman said, laughing in her fist, she herself probably didn't know who the father would be. And so it came to pass that the sisters gave birth simultaneously. Tanka to a boy and Masha to a girl. And Lyubka, to hide from the shame, began to drink more and more often with Pashka and quarrel with him. That's when perestroika came to all of us, damn it. The collective farm collapsed, everything was closed down, everyone ran away. Only a few sturdy men like Semyon were left, and they formed an artel, fixed the machinery, started plowing the land, and organized a dairy farm. They fought off racketeers and officials. They survived. Sturdy, hard-working men. Everything went on like that. Semyon worked, kopek by kopek. Everything went into the house. Mashka did the household chores and gave birth to children, and she had 3 girls. They bought a car, a Niva, to make it easier to go to town. Mashka is still embarrassed that she brings only girls to her husband, but he laughs. Girls, he says, are good too, only if they were healthy. Lubka wouldn't even look at them. She was angry, but Pashka often looked in when he was hard and kept crying how bad it was for him with Lyubka. But he kept on drinking and got drunk. He fell drunk into a ditch and drowned himself. It was autumn, rains. Then the women Lyubka and Tanka went completely off the rails. They didn't dry out at all. There was nothing to eat at home. They had drunk everything. The children were crying hungry. They had 3 of them. All boys. All dirty, untreated, overgrown. Where neighbors would feed them, where they would steal something. They survived as best they could. Mashka started to take them in. She washed them, made their clothes fit. And for the first time they felt good attitude to themselves. And they didn't want to leave. Mashuka's place is warm. She always has food. She takes care of them. And her half-sisters too. All the children are together, in a single ball around the house. And when Semyon comes, there's such a clamor, only Masha can calm them down. At first the boys were afraid of Semyon. He's big, wide, fists like a sledgehammer, and a voice like a barrel. But in fact, he's a kindly fellow like few others. He tumbles around with kids, both his own and Tanka's. Of course, their mother and grandmother, who are always drunk, are hungry and cold, and they are only shouted at and even beaten, and then Tanka ran away. Just like that. No arguments with her mother, no relationship problems. Just in the morning after another drink, the woman disappeared as if she never existed. Just a note on the table. She's gone to make a life for herself. If I make money, I'll come back, and if I don't, I won't. So Grandma Luba was left on her own. The children immediately realized what was going on and went to Mama Masha. They'd been calling her that for a long time. They didn't like their own blood so much. She took them in, of course, but thought about it. It was one thing to give them a plate of soup and a piece of bread once in a while, and another to take them on full board. What would Semyon say? And Seon's like water off a goose's back. It's high time, he says, and now we've only got girls, and now we'll have boys too. She told him, what are we going to feed them with? Where there were 3, there'll be 6. And she's laughing, and so it soon turned out. God only knows how Mashka got custody of the orphans. But soon Grandma Lyuba burnt out from drinking. She just didn't wake up after another binge, and Tanka's children became Masha's and Semyonov's. They grew up. Some of them got married and had children of their own. They have a sort of schedule, a queue, who comes to their parents when, what they bring, and what they do around the house. They only have to set the table and take care of their grandchildren. No matter what you say, but Ludka is lying as if she's lying. There's no one in our village happier than Masha, except Semyon,